Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Blue Maxima, and I want to talk to you a little bit about the fan translation of Sakura Wars, or Sakura Wars. It's me and Japanese pronunciations. I can't remember what I had for breakfast in the morning. I can't remember Japanese pronunciations to boot, but yes. This is a relatively niche title, but it's a more notable title of the niche titles. So, Sakura Wars is a really long-standing series of strategy RPGs combined with visual novels. Very few of them have made it west, and by very few of them, I mean one came out on the PS2, one's coming out on the PS4, and that's it, and the series has had like 10 games and several remakes, so it's very notable in that sense, excuse me. So, it is a very notable series from Sega, and some people decided, hey, let's go fan translate the first one. And they went to do that. They tried to do it on the PC, but apparently the PC version had a few problems with it that had some things that they needed to just work around. So, after a little bit of trying to translate that, they decided to translate the original Saturn version, and that worked pretty well, because they managed to get the entire thing done. So, I'm playing it here. I apologize for the squeaky chair. It's going to annoy the shit out of me. This is the fan translated version, obviously. I didn't play the Japanese one. And it is very easy to download and install, at least from my point of view. I had a copy of Sakura Wars lying around, so I was... Not an actual physical copy, a digital copy. If I had a physical copy of Sakura Wars, I'd be a little bit worried. But... yes, I had a copy lying around. I managed to do the instructions they give you, which is download a couple of pieces of software, make a new rip of the game, and then patch that. And as you can see, it works fine. I played it on Mendefen, which is the emulator they recommend. Needed a couple of Sega Saturn BIOS files and a front end to make actually running the games a little bit less of a pain in the neck, but it worked fine after I went through the readme. It's very detailed. I was a little bit disappointed by the fact that they didn't translate anything like the manual, because one of the things I noted about Sakura Wars is that you kind of dropped into it with very little context as to what's going on. Sorry, I felt the need to stop for that because one of the things I do like about this game is those video clips. They're infrequent, but they're well done, they're well produced, and I quite like watching them. They're usually either very dramatic or entertaining in that trashy anime way, but as I was saying, they didn't translate the manual, as far as I can tell, and I don't know if I missed something in like the intro video that would try and tell me the context, but when I just hit and went and hit start game, it immediately drops you into the plot and doesn't give you that much context. I mean, it does tell you that you're a fresh out of military school candidate who becomes a sort of commander to the Imperial Assault Troop, which also happens to be a theater group. That's their sort of cover for operating in the city. What it doesn't tell you is that this game takes place in, I believe, 1926. So, when you first go into a battle and you see everyone running around in mechs and a sort of, like, hero transformation sequence that's very reminiscent of something like the Thunderbirds, it all feels very 70s. Which is really bizarre considering the game takes place in 1926. Also, you might think that you're fighting like actual other mechanized people, but no, you're actually fighting demons. Like literal demons. Apparently. I'm not entirely sure why they didn't feel the need to tell me this. I am coming into this with very little knowledge of what Sakura Wars is. I've heard of it before. I've got a copy of the PS2 game that I've been meaning to get around to playing at some point, but yeah, other than that, I have no knowledge of this series whatsoever, so dropping in and having basically no idea what was going on was a little weird, especially since it looks a lot more like a modern thing than it does like any other thing. You start to realize something's a little bit off when you're going to places like theaters and it's literally like they're silent films with a narrator off to the side. That's bizarre. It's just a little bit of a weird thing that I should probably bring up. It's fine once you get used to it. It's just a little weird if you drop in with absolutely no context. But anyway, this is Sakura Wars. This is like the majority of the gameplay right here. It's a visual novel, and you listen to people talk. Sometimes they're voiced, sometimes they're not. The voice acting is well done. I've got nothing against it. Little bit annoying, little bit anime-ish, but I mean, you know, you kind of get used to that if you play enough of these games like I do. I'm just saying, it's decent at what it does. For a Sega Saturn game that came out, not came out the year I was born, it came out a couple of years after I was born. I think it came out in 1995, but yeah, for a game that came out in 1995, the level of presentation going on here is actually pretty good. The only real downside is the low resolution of everything, but again, it's a Saturn game. I'm recording this in 1080p, but trust me, this game is not 1080p. Not even close. But yes, anyway. So the majority of the game is these visual novel sections where you're talking to people. Sometimes you're given the opportunity to wander around the theater and you'll run into other characters and you'll have events with them. And sometimes you'll have opportunities to play little mini games as well, although they're very, very lightweight. Like, there's a couple that I played. I played Koi Koi, which was interesting. I've never been very good at Koi Koi because I'm never able to tell what is actually a pair because, well, I've never played Koi Koi. It's probably a lot easier for people who grow up with Koi Koi being a thing in their culture. If I say Koi Koi anymore, I'm going to go Koi Koi crazy. But anyway. But yes. Sometimes you get the opportunity to just wander around and you'll run into people, get events, play minigames. There's another one. It's like a slot machine where you have to stop the slots in the right place in order to get higher scores. There's another one where you basically have to hammer right the button and try and avoid some mines while you're swimming through this pool. And as far as I'm aware, every girl has their own unique minigame, and depending on how well you do in these minigames and these timed choices that you get when they pop up in the game itself, you'll get positive or negative relationship with them. And sometimes this will work well for you, sometimes this will work bad for you. I think that the girl you end up liking the most, you'll eventually end up going out with. Now, I will admit that I didn't make it to the end of this game. I only got to episode 4 before I decided to put it down. I got a few reasons for that, but we'll get to them. But yeah, basically, I think the girl that you like the most is the one you'll eventually get with in the end. Although I don't believe you have to romance anyone in particular, although it's kind of the point, so you might as well if you can. But yeah, do well enough, you will you'll try and influence them romantically to like you, you know the general deal. There is another benefit. It does actually make them stronger in battle depending on what their mood is like. So if they're in a bad mood, you might want to keep them towards the back of the pack because they'll actually have lower stats and take more damage. This game is actually very lightweight on the battle system mechanics. There are a couple of things that I don't think I've got into yet, depending on how deep you get into the game. But I will tell you, the first few fights in this game are a drag, man. They're a real drag. But let me just stop jumping around the place for a minute. We'll talk about the visual novel style gameplay because we're here and looking at it. There's no auto, which is frustratingly annoying because you have to be constantly pressing the button to move on. But the text cursor is very slow, and you've got a choice. You can either hammer away at the A and the B buttons to make the voice text cancel and then immediately go into the next one, or you can just keep pressing A, but the voice text won't let you skip on to the next line until it's played out completely, and the thing has tracked all the way across the screen. What I'm trying to say is the auto timing is not even the auto timing, but like the timing that you get from, like, you know, the text going across the screen versus the actual voice, they don't match up. So the voice is over, you want to move on to the next line because you get the general gist of it, but you can't. So that and these choices. Sometimes these choices can be a little frustrating. So, you know, like in most games where you have the most obvious option for the good option and then the most obvious option for the bad option, in this game they tend to swap them around. Sometimes the option that looks the most reasonable ends up being the one that hurts the relationship a little bit more, and vice versa. So sometimes it can be a bit of a pain in the neck. You can also carry around items, and that'll like help you out with like relationships and stuff like that, but I haven't gone too much into that just yet. there are some like minor side quests you can do. Like you get a letter from a fan in the first chapter that you can take to the actor that it's for bonus relationship or minus relationship. I didn't actually do it. I completely forgot it was a thing. And you do have moments like this where you've got a limited amount of time to wander around the place, look for events, because sometimes you'll just run into them, and sometimes you'll have to go to the specific area that they're in order to get them. But it's not like a game like Persona, for example, where they tell you where they actually are. You have to go around and you have to actively find them. And considering that you've got a limited amount of rooms that you can go search, it can get a little bit frustrating if you're trying to look for a specific girl. I believe the further on you get in the game and the more you learn about them, the more you might be able to figure out about where they'll be at any particular time. But right now I'm just kind of flying by the seat of my pants, hoping for anything in particular to happen, just, you know, just to see it. Like, see, there we go, that's an event that I just wandered into. She's cute. All the girls are cute. They are very... I don't want to say flat on the ground, because as is the case with games like these, sometimes they just get full, like, massive amounts of time to themselves later on. But there are a few characters who don't get very much screen time in the beginning. The only, like... The main girl, well, I say main girl, but none of them are really the main girl, but Sakura is... basically, all she gets, if you don't go with her during a specific event, is her basically being a jealous lover, despite the fact that you let on that none of this, you have no romantic relationship with anyone yet. That's all you get from her. All you get from Surmaya is that she's kind of a bitch. All you get from Maria is that she's kind of tall and stoic. There's one character I wish there was more of in the one chapter that she shows up in, and that's Kana, who basically looks like a giant tomboy. Like, the intro video shows you sitting back to back with her having, like, ramen, and it kind of gives you an idea of her character. Like, she's one of the boys, and that's kind of neat, but yeah. It's more or less dedicated to the slice of life and the theater troupe of things that in the first few chapters, at least, you don't get that much time with the individual characters, at least not until, like, chapter 3, which is what chapter this is, where you get a little bit more of an idea of Maria's backstory, which is the girl right in front of you right now, if I remember to sync this audio up correctly. But it's all a bit focused on the slice of life stuff a bit more. It's very anime. Like, that's the first thing I really want to say about this game. It is intensely anime, as in... Excuse me. So, this game is intensely anime. Like, ridiculously anime. It feels like watching an old series from the 90s. Like, a sort of slice of life series from the 90s. I'm thinking something along the lines of, you know, K-On! Like, where it's light and fluffy, and then you get into the mech battles, and even then they aren't particularly dark. Although there are one or two things that come up in the earlier chapters that look a little bit strange. But they don't seem to go anywhere, at least in the chapter that they're brought up in. But, you know, plant seeds for later chapters, that's just a thing. It's not really helped out by the fan translation. There's Kana. It's not really helped out by the fan translation, though, because the fan translation just seems a bit generic. Like, it doesn't have that much flavor to it. All of the characters tend to feel like they're almost coming from the same voice. Like, you've got the general... that General Yoneda, I think his name is. He is basically a drunk, but he's got a much more determined character voice. And so does Kana, but a lot of the girls seem to share the same character voice a lot of the time, and it kind of makes it hard to tell the difference between them. And it doesn't really do that great of a job in keeping me interested in the story, because all of the writing just feels like, I don't really feel like I'm learning too much about the actual girls themselves. It just feels like generic back and forth banter more than it does anything else. And considering that the first 3 chapters are like 4 or 5 hours before stuff really starts to get interesting, and you can kind of understand why I was starting to feel a little bit fatigued. And it's not helped out by the fact that the battles, man, the battles are a bit of a pain in the ass. So I was talking earlier about how the visual novel sections have a little bit of a pain in the ass control scheme where you need to hammer away the A button to continue on through text lines, even if the voice line already completely emptied and is already completely played. And either that or you have to hammer away the B button, skip the voices, but also, you know, skip the text, but also skip the voices completely, which is really frustrating. You just can't increase, like, the read speed. I imagine this wasn't a problem for the Japanese version, but when it comes to the English version, it feels like it makes it read way too slowly. With that said, though, the main thing about that is control problems, in the sense that when you've got control problems, you just end up having a little bit of a problem here. There is also a cursor that you have to move around sometimes to do things like interact with menus. The control issues get 3 times worse as soon as you get into battles, because you've got your typical grid setup with menus that you have to activate, and you have to move your cursor around and select your units, move them and attack with them and stuff like that. And the cursor is just not up to the job. Even at I tried all of the different speeds they give you, and they also give you the way to speed it up by holding one of the shoulder buttons, but it's just really frustrating to use. The cursor moves like really sluggishly most of the time, and it can be kind of hard to align on one particular space that you want without going over into another space, and having to go through and having to move your person gently just to make sure that they don't end up in the wrong space is just really frustrating. There are also some buttons that'll put you into these modes that are kind of hard to get out of. Like if you accidentally press B instead of A on a person to activate something, it'll go into this weird mode where it'll show you their move range, and an attack range that's way blown out over any sort of actual attack that they have. And I'm not entirely sure why it does that. And you have to circle through all of these things with the B button and then press the C button, which will then take you back to the person who's already having their turn. So it's just this weird setup that I found myself tripping over a lot. It isn't helped by the fact that the default animation speed for everything in the game, in the battle scenes I should say, is unbelievably slow. Like, there are mechs that take 30 seconds to walk like 5 spaces, or at least it feels like 30 seconds. It's not 30 seconds, but it feels like a really long time. You can speed up some of this stuff by pressing and holding the A button, but that'll only work for one unit at a time. So when it swaps to another unit and another unit decides to take its turn, you have to take your finger off the A button, then put it right back down again to speed up the animations, and you have to do this constantly. And it's really frustrating, because it makes the battles way slower and way more sluggish than they have to be. Especially since you can't skip attack animations. Like, at all. It just seems like that you have to sit through every single one, even if you've already seen it. And it makes it just a big pain in the neck. Like, a really big pain in the neck to play the battles. And it's also not helped out by the fact that the first few battles that you actually have to play are really quite easy. Like, all you really have to do in the first few battles is just send all your mechs that aren't in a bad mood at the enemy. You do get a fair few things you can do. You can do 2 actions in any one turn. You can do a move action, an attack action, or a defense action. Attack actions involve a regular attack and a special attack, which is charged up by either resting with your defense action or by taking hits. And you've also got the ability to restore other units with like health packs and defend yourself for lower amounts of damage. So you've got a fair amount of stuff to work with. It's just the slow battles plus the fact that it basically turns into run straight at the enemy in a decent blob and just attack from all sides usually works. There are a couple of there are a couple of different like mechs in the game that belong to each of the different girls that all have like what's the word? That all have their own unique attacks. Like Kanna is good at hands-on combat. She'll do more damage than anyone else. There's Maria, who has a machine gun that's ranged. The Chinese girl who's wearing the traditional Chinese dress. She has a long-range rocket launcher that will do splash damage. You've got your regular dude who's basically just a good all-rounder but doesn't have a ranged attack. I think his special attack is ranged though? I don't remember, if I'm being perfectly honest. But yeah, the battles are just too easy. That's the main problem with them. As I said before, big blob, straight up the middle. You're almost guaranteed to win every time. They don't give you enough enemies to deal with. They give you a lot of restoratives. The only way you could really fail is if you are really, really bad. Like, I played Utawara Ramono on normal, and even that felt harder than this one does, if that gives you an idea. I don't know if that was meant to be because they wanted this game to appeal to a wider audience, but I really do think they could have made the strategy battles a bit harder. The most annoying thing I had to face in, like, the 4 battles that they made me do is there was this one map that was laid out just a little bit weirdly with an impassable wall that I had to work my way around, and that was basically the most annoying thing of them all. And even then it wasn't that annoying because there were 3 rockets that fired straight forward on top of the ridge, but I just sent my rocket dude up there and fired into the cannons until they basically didn't exist anymore. It was super easy. So yeah, it's a little bit disappointing if I'm being perfectly honest. I was hoping for something with at least a little bit of depth to it, and again, it might improve later on. They might make battles harder. They might give you more things that'll help improve on the overall flow of battle. But in this case, it just didn't happen. And I'm a little bit disappointed because that seems to be kind of the entire thing with this game. It's all, this kind of was almost there, but it just didn't happen at the very end of the day. The story is potentially interesting, having to literally fight demons, trying to keep everything secret. But it's kind of let down by a lukewarm fan translation that has a little bit of a trouble with character voice and making everyone a little bit interesting to listen to. It just feels like generic anime level banter, which is, I guess, kind of what this thing is meant to be. But then again, one of my favorite games is Muv-Luv. You've already seen that by now if you've been watching my Top 100 Vita Games videos. But considering that Muv-Luv came out in 2001, it was generic as hell, but it still had better writing than this. I feel like that there could have been at least some room for improvement here. They might have wanted to stay accurate to the original source material, which may well have been generic anime bullshit, but I'm not going to claim to know off the top of my head. As I have said multiple times, I don't know Japanese. But yeah, the writing is just a little bit lukewarm thanks to potentially a bad translation, potentially just bad writing in general. The overall visual novel style gameplay is slightly let down by the fact that you can make the wrong choice while thinking you're making the right one. It might be just me. I've been terrible at relationships my entire life. It's entirely possible that this is just a me thing. There are a couple of things I appreciate about it though. Sometimes they let you do things like look at particular parts of the body, and if you stare at the chest for too long, you'll get like a down rank in relationship, which is something that makes perfect sense. You know, it's a nice little touch. I do appreciate the presentation they've got going on. For a game that came out in '95 on the Saturn, the art is nice. It all looks pretty decent. The videos are actually fun to watch. And the voice acting is fine. I've got nothing wrong with the voice acting. The voices suit what little of the characters I was able to really pull out of them, outside the basic stuff. The overall battles, at least the ones that I had the opportunity to really play, weren't particularly interesting. Just not that much in the way of interesting mechanics, and the difficulty was just way too low. So I found myself not enjoying them very much, and by Chapter 4, I was pretty much done. Episode 4, I should say. Because yes, they even structure it like episodes, with having a bloody next episode preview at the end of each one, which is a little weird. Just a little. I mean, they could have saved the space for like more videos, but okay. It's interesting. I will always say that. I'm done with it. I don't really feel the need to play anymore. It was interesting to see, and I do appreciate that it got fan translated for the people that are for the people who really wanted to play it in a language that wasn't Japanese or Russian, funnily enough. But I just found myself not feeling particularly enamored with it. I wonder if the fan translation patch could have helped with this. Faster auto text, maybe. The ability to turn on sped up animations all the time. maybe made the battles a little bit harder, I don't know, but it would have been nice to have a few quality of life changes that might have helped. Maybe even save anywhere, but to be fair, they do give you pretty frequent save points. Like, you'll get one every, like, 30 minutes to an hour at very most. It's very often not that long. Like, the intro sequence is probably the longest period that I went without a save point, and even then it was still only, like, 45 minutes. So, it's alright. It's nothing particularly special, I think, is what I'm most disappointed by, because you'd think with a series that's this long that the first entry would be a good one, but who knows? Maybe the later entries are just way better for some reason. Maybe the one they released on PS2, So Long My Love, is actually way better. Maybe the one they're bringing out on PS4, Project Sakura Wars, which basically reboots the entire series and turns the combat into Dynasty Warriors style hack and slash. Maybe that one will be interesting. I'm going to have a look at that one, but it's not terrible. I'm just not interested anymore. That seems to be the point of it. So I'm just going to let the rest of this footage play out. There's still like 20-something minutes of it left. I don't go too far into the episode to, you know, for spoilers and all that, but I feel kind of bad for cutting the recording when I did, because it was like 5 minutes more and it really wasn't that spoilery. So, you know, I'm not particularly annoyed by it. Would I recommend it? If you can withstand generic anime bullshit more than I can, and I've got a pretty high tolerance for this sort of thing, it might be worth your time, but I'd tell you to go play something else instead. Go play 428, go play Muv-Luv, go play Steins Gate, Danganronpa. You know, if you've gone through all the usual ones, this might be a good place to go, but yeah. Not something I'd recommend off the top of my hat. With that said, though, I'm going to have to go play the PS2 one now, aren't I? Oh well. This has been Blue Maxima. I will see you all next time.
オンキリキリバサラウンバッタオンキリキリバサラウンバッタオンキリキリバサラウンバッタオンキリキリバサラウンバッタ帝国歌劇団参上現れよったな帝都の犬どもめ六八
私の出番です。そこ私が頑張んなきゃ 神崎風神流胡蝶の舞。隊長のスーパーリンパイ。そこ。私が りましたわ。
ローコ滅却怪盗乱魔。
うちも頑張らせてもらうで。チェスター。よっしゃー。敵を隊長の
と
よっしゃー。行くでー。やったで。
私の出番ですわね。やりましたわ。
そこ。
私がガン。
気がついたかね。ついにお前は我らの手に落ちたのだ、大神一郎。これで帝劇も終わりだな。さて大神君、私の優秀な助手を紹介しよ
やっほー大神はん。ほんまええざまや。
う。どうだね大神君、かつての部下によって改造される気持ちは。君は我らの手によって改造され、クロノス界の新たな手先となるのだ。さあコーラン、お前の腕を振るって新たなる同志新大神一郎を誕生させるのだ。
よっしゃ任しとき。いや嬉しいわ。うちいっぺん人体改造やってみたかったんや。大丈夫や。動物実験やったら失敗したことないんや。さ、痛いことないからジタバタせんとうちに任しとき。